Gente, mais uma vez eu estou fazendo esse vídeo fora da minha programação porque eu preciso expressar para vocês essa angústia que eu estou sentindo de uma notícia que eu recebi ontem de madrugada e hoje eu percebi que ela ganhou assim uma ampla divulgação na rede. Não deve ser novidade para você essa informação, mas eu queria já de início alertar o seguinte: essa notícia é uma notícia de extrema gravidade, extremíssima gravidade, que afeta todo um curso histórico da humanidade, eu diria. Tá? Para quem acompanha meu canal no YouTube e está inscrito na comunidade no Facebook, sabe que assim, eu sou muito brincalhão, né? Meus vídeos têm assim uma tônica bem sarcástica, às vezes até de humor negro, mas assim, eu sou assim, eu tenho esse jeito, tá? Mas tem momentos em que a gente tem que falar assim de uma forma muito séria, muito objetiva. E é dessa forma que eu vou procurar transmitir essa informação para vocês, tá? O que está acontecendo é muito sério, é muito grave e muito perigoso também. Bom, você provavelmente deve ter recebido um feed no Facebook dizendo que a Associação Americana de Psiquiatria mudou a nomenclatura da pedofilia de distúrbio mental para orientação sexual ou simplesmente preferência sexual. Essa Associação Americana de Psiquiatria, ela tem um periódico chamado DSM, que significa, eu vou ler aqui porque eu não gravei ainda o nome, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders, que traduzindo significa Manual Diagnóstico e Estatístico de Transtornos Mentais, onde a pedofilia era considerada como distúrbio mental. Então nessa última edição houve essa alteração na nomenclatura de distúrbio mental para orientação sexual ou preferência sexual. Uma outra associação nos Estados Unidos, chamada American Family Association, pegou essa informação e levou até um site de grande credibilidade nos Estados Unidos chamado Charisma News. Esse site, Charisma News, pegou essa informação e soltou. E aí foi aquele frenesi que todo mundo viu acontecer. Não foi só no Brasil, foi no mundo todo. Logo em seguida, essa Associação Americana de Psiquiatria lançou uma nota não oficial dizendo que, embora essa nomenclatura tivesse mudado, a conduta da pedofilia ela ainda estaria enquadrada dentro de um distúrbio mental. Só que olha onde é que está a charada da coisa. Essa nomenclatura ela muda de distúrbio mental para orientação sexual ou opção sexual, até o momento em que o indivíduo não pratique o ato da pedofilia, ou seja, enquanto ele não consumar o ato da pedofilia, ele é considerado o sentimento que ele tem, né, nutrido, o desejo que ele tem por uma outra criança sexual, é considerado uma orientação ou uma opção até o momento em que ele não pratique o ato da pedofilia. A partir do momento que ele comete o ato, aí sim ele se enquadra num contexto do distúrbio mental. Então, dentro desse contexto, segundo essa Associação Americana de Psiquiatria, existe uma separação entre a pedofilia e a desordem pedófila. Só que não se engane, existe uma pegadinha por trás disso aí. Eu vou dar um exemplo aqui. Vamos supor, eu tenho maior tesão pela minha vizinha. Vamos dar um exemplo. Mas enquanto eu não transar com a minha vizinha, eu não cometi o adultério. Só que o problema está naquele velho ditado muito conhecido de todo mundo, que a ocasião faz o ladrão. Se o cara que é pedófilo, ele entende que essa orientação dele é respaldada e ela tem o consentimento legal, para ele é uma mera questão de oportunidade praticar esse ato de pedofilia, entendeu? É aquela coisa, eu posso sentir o desejo, mas eu não posso praticar. Não, você não pode nem sentir o desejo. Você não pode nem expressar isso em hipótese alguma. Então, o que a gente pode entender dessa jogada que está acontecendo é que, assim, essa questão da pedofilia, aos pouquinhos, está começando a ser introduzida na sociedade. Porque eles não vão colocar isso escrachadamente, porque vai dar problema. A reação pública vai ser imediata, como já está sendo. Só que essas estratagemas, isso é uma mera forma de manipular a informação e a opinião pública. Para dizer o seguinte, não, isso aí não foi legalizado. Isso aí foi só mudou-se o contexto interno desse manual, desse diagnóstico de distúrbios mentais, quando na verdade não é nada disso. Agora, isso não me causa tanto espanto, porque a partir do momento que gays, lésbicas, travestis e homossexuais têm os mesmos direitos, por que os pedófilos não vão ter? Então não seria justo, com essa classe de indivíduos que nutre esse tipo de sentimento, fazer essa separação. A questão menos importante na cabeça desses psicopatas não é o objeto de desejo, mas sim a consumação do próprio desejo, independente do objeto. Porque esses desejos, numa concepção de novo mundo, ele não pode ser suprimido por questões de princípios morais e valores éticos, entendeu? Então, partindo dessa premissa, não vai demorar muito para que comece a surgir grupos de zoofilista, necrofilista, né? Exigindo o direito à prática sexual com animais ou com cadáveres. Mas é o próximo passo. Quando eu me deparo diante de notícias como essa, eu tenho a certeza, sabe, de que as minhas suspeitas e às vezes até as minhas paranoias, elas só se confirmam diante de informações que eu recebo, como essas daí que eu acabei de citar para vocês. Há um tempo atrás, quando eu fiz um vídeo dizendo que os nossos verdadeiros inimigos estavam promovendo o casamento gay, eu fui alvo de muitas críticas por isso, recebi uma enxurrada de comentários negativos e até ofensivos também, tá? E em todos os comentários eu sempre terminava com a seguinte frase: o problema não é o casamento gay, é o que vem depois. Essa questão da pedofilia, isso que vocês estão vendo acontecer hoje, isso é só a ponta do iceberg. Para quem não sabe, a Organização Mundial de Saúde, ela está subordinada à ONU. A questão do homossexualismo, ele só saiu da Classificação Internacional de Doenças, o CID-10, por uma questão de votação. Não houve nada que comprovasse absolutamente que a questão homossexual não era inerente a uma característica de distúrbio mental. Ou seja, a questão foi mais política do que científica. Agora, uma coisa que muita gente não sabe é que o transexualismo ele ainda consta na Classificação Internacional de Doenças. Se eu não me engano, eu acho que é RF ou EF66, uma coisa assim. Ele consta como uma orientação sexual egodistônica, tá? Logo, classificada como doença. O homossexualismo só saiu por uma questão de votação, ou seja, a coisa aconteceu mais no âmbito político do que científico, tá? Então, a mesma coisa que a gente viu acontecer em 1990 com a questão do homossexualismo está acontecendo hoje com a pedofilia. Eu alerto a vocês que isso é só a ponta do iceberg. O que eles querem fazer é uma verdadeira destruição máxima e absoluta dos conceitos que a gente tem hoje. Conceitos esses que firmaram e que formaram toda a civilização ocidental, tá? Eles querem... É uma coisa monstruosa, tá? Tem gente muito poderosa por trás disso. O senador Magno Malta há muito tempo abandonou a questão da pedofilia porque se deparou de frente com essa realidade, tá? Se ele aponta quais são os principais responsáveis por isso ou não, isso é uma outra questão que eu não quero abordar aqui, entendeu? Mas ele já sabe o que está acontecendo, tá? A coisa é muito grave, tá? Mas o que me espanta, na verdade, não é a gente falar a coisa é grave, a coisa é grave. O problema é que a coisa é grave, as pessoas se chocam, alguns se manifestam, entendeu? Mas a lei é aprovada. A coisa entra na engrenagem, entendeu? E não adianta a gente fazer nada, porque a gente está de mãos atadas, entendeu? Bom, vamos lá. Essa questão da pedofilia, eu vou falar para você que, embora eu esteja assim absolutamente chocado com essa notícia, eu já previa que isso fosse acontecer. Entendeu? Porque na Holanda, por exemplo, já existem comunidades, já existem associações oficialmente reconhecidas pelo Estado, como se fosse, por exemplo, grupos de LGBT aqui no Brasil. Lá existem grupos de pedófilos legalmente reconhecidos, entendeu? Então você vê que é aquilo que o professor de Carvalho, aquilo que o professor Olavo de Carvalho falou. A primeira coisa é alguém com as devidas credenciais lançar o tema, as pessoas inicialmente vão ficar chocadas com o tema, depois passa-se a discutir o tema, e depois, conforme o tema é exaustivamente discutido, as pessoas vão se acostumando com a ideia, de forma que ela se aproxime cada vez mais da sua aprovação e aceitação no senso comum, entendeu? Assim, a visão que eu tenho da coisa é uma visão tão obscura, tão pessimista, que o que eu estou vendo que está acontecendo hoje, eu vou falar em nível Brasil, porque eu não quero expandir muito, né, nível global, mas o que eu estou vendo que está acontecendo hoje no Brasil é o que aconteceu, mais uma vez eu repito, é o que aconteceu com os judeus na época da Alemanha nazista. Eles foram levados aos campos de concentração como ovelhas para o abate. E eles só se deram conta do que estava acontecendo depois que eles estavam lá dentro e os portões foram fechados. Aí que começou a matança em série, entendeu? Então o pessoal está sendo conduzido como ovelhinha para o abate e a população não acordou para isso. E infelizmente não vai acordar. Ano que vem eu estou com um projeto de montar um projeto de estudo para que esse projeto seja disseminado nas igrejas, entendeu? Eu vou me voluntariar a dar essa palestra, esse curso. Eu pretendo formar uma equipe de pessoas para que a gente estude junto, não que eu possa ensinar nada para elas, porque a questão não é ensinar, mas sim trocar informações e experiências, entendeu? Eu tenho certeza que nesse projeto eu também vou aprender muita coisa, mas eu tenho isso em mente de estar levando isso nas igrejas. A gente precisa começar a alertar as pessoas que estão dentro da igreja do que realmente está acontecendo hoje no Brasil, entendeu? E por mais que eu tenho certeza que a gente não vai conseguir frear o que está acontecendo, mas eu tenho a esperança de que pelo menos retardar o que está acontecendo, a gente pode fazer isso sim, tá? Para finalizar, eu vou deixar um vídeo logo depois que eu acabar aqui a minha fala. Eu vou deixar um vídeo que é um documentário de uma menininha, tá, americana, que sofreu abuso sexual desde o momento em que assim, desde que ela era bebê. Ela era bebê, o pai era alcoólatra, a mãe parece que tinha separado, tinha morrido, não sei exatamente, não lembro exatamente, mas ela sofria abusos sexuais. E vocês vão perceber nesse documentário como esse abuso sexual destruiu completamente a capacidade dela de discernir aquilo que é certo do que é errado. Ela teve que fazer um trabalho assim amplo e exaustivo de recomposição psicológica, entendeu? Então eu peço, por favor, assistam todo o documentário e vocês vão entender um pouquinho só da gravidade do problema. O que eles querem? Eles querem realmente tornar a civilização assim completamente louca, completamente descontrolada, dando liberdades absolutas e ilimitadas para essas pessoas, para que depois eles cheguem fazendo todo o arremate, todos os ajustes, entendeu? E de uma forma totalmente totalitarista. Isso já está acontecendo. E muita gente não está se dando conta disso.
Are people afraid of you, Beth?
Uh-huh.
Who's afraid of you, Beth?
John.
Your brother. And what is your brother, why is your brother afraid of you?
Because I hurt him so much.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And what, at nighttime, what do your parents do to your door?
Lock it shut.
Why do they lock it shut?
Because they don't want me to hurt John.
Right. And they're kind of afraid of hurting John? Of you hurting John?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Are they afraid that you might hurt them?
Yep.
Would you, Beth?
Mm-hmm.
When would you do it?
Nighttime.
Okay. Why would you do nighttime?
Because I don't like them seeing me do it. But they can feel me do it.
Mm-hmm. And what would you do to him, Beth?
Stab them.
Okay. What would you stab him with?
A knife.
The program you are about to see was compiled from the actual therapy tapes of Dr. Ken McGidd, a clinical psychologist specializing in the treatment of severely abused children. Children so traumatized in the first years of life that they do not bond with other people. They are children who cannot love or accept love. Children without conscience who can hurt or even kill without remorse. This film shows the devastating effects of abuse on a child. It also shows that victims can be helped. It is the story of a 6.5-year-old girl named Beth.
Do you ever stick pins in people?
Mm-hmm.
Who?
My brother.
Okay. Do you do it a little bit or a lot?
A lot.
Okay. And what are you trying to do to your brother?
Kill him.
Why do you want your brother to die?
Because I was hurt so bad, and I don't want to be around people.
Okay. Who else would you like to stick pins into?
Mommy and Daddy.
What would you like to have happen to them?
Die.
Jesus couldn't have lived to save Israel, yet he chose to die to save the world.
Tim is the minister of a small Methodist church in the South. He and his wife Julie have been married for 12 years.
Jesus didn't say
Unable to have children of their own, they decided to adopt. In February of 1984, they received a call from the Department of Social Services telling them they had 2 children available for adoption. They were told that Beth, 19 months old, and her brother Jonathan, 7 months old, were normal and healthy.
we did not need children to make our lives complete. We felt secure in ourselves and secure in our relationship, but we wanted to share that with somebody else. And we felt like we had a lot to pass on to a child, and that was what we really wanted to do. And when the phone call came, it was like, at last it's here.
It seemed like a miracle. It had happened so quick. We'd heard of couples having to wait 5-10 years on a child, and here we had 2 young children. It was like the answer to our dream.
Their dream became a nightmare when they realized that Beth and Jonathan had severe emotional problems.
We had the kids with us, Beth and her younger brother John, for probably a couple of months until we began to learn something about their background and their past. And when we learned it, some things seemed to fall in place about her behavior and John's behavior. From several sources, we discovered that they didn't have enough food to eat. That perhaps even Beth went all day maybe with just a box of Kix cereal. John himself was found in a bassinet with little patches of urine all over it and a dirty diaper and a couple of bottles at his feet that had curdled milk, and the back of his head was completely flat. The front of his head had bulged out, and at 7 months he couldn't raise his head, couldn't roll over. He was just had no stimulation, and we think perhaps that had happened to Beth, and it wasn't very long until she began showing some signs of perhaps even some abuse. There was a nightmare that she had. And the nightmare was about a man who was falling on her and hurting her with a part of himself.
Tell me about your birth father. What was that nightmare like?
When he touched my vagina
Okay.
until it bled, hurt it a lot until it bled, and wouldn't feed me a lot. He'd hit on me, wouldn't be very nice to me.
How old were you?
1.
And in your nightmare, what happens?
I get real scared.
Where are you in the nightmare? What happens in the dream?
I'm in the house, upstairs.
And then what happens, Beth?
When he comes upstairs and, hurts.
How do you feel when you talk about this?
Scared.
Where's your birth father? What's he doing?
He's right there, and there's his hand. His hand's right there.
Where?
Right there. You can't hardly see it because it's green.
What's it touching?
My vagina.
And what is your birth father doing?
Hurting it.
Your face looks sad. Can you tell me about that?
It's crying because there's dots of the tears.
Beth had endured severe neglect and abuse as a child. Her birth mother died when she was 1. Because of these early childhood experiences, Beth never developed a sense of conscience, love, or trust for anyone. The early sexual abuse by her birth father would cause her to exhibit inappropriate sexual behavior, especially toward her brother.
Does your brother have private parts?
Yeah.
Yeah. What is his private parts?
Penis and butt.
And what do you do with your brother, with his private parts, Beth?
I heard it.
Tell me about it. What do you do?
Now, I pinch it. Squeeze it. Kick it.
When you do things to your brother's private parts, what does he say?
Stop.
Okay, tell me that.
Well, he says stop, but I don't stop.
Do you hurt him?
A lot.
Okay. And would you like to do that to other boys?
When I caught her with Jonathan one morning, she was molesting him. He was crying and his pants were down, and I said, Beth, what's happening? And she said, I pulled his penis and put my finger up his anus. And I said, didn't he say to stop? And she said, yeah, he did. And I said, did you? And she said, no.
Have you ever rubbed your private parts? Do you do it a lot?
A lot.
How much do you do that?
Not every single day in Lexington. I did it every single day until it got real bad and messed up, and I had to go to the doctor, and I did not like it.
What do you mean by real bad?
Well, it looked real raw, got all kinds of boo-boos on it, germs, a lot of stuff from my hand.
And it bled?
She started to masturbate at inappropriate times. I remember one time, specifically, when we were at the hospital waiting for Tim to come out. He was there visiting. And Beth and John were in the back seat, and I turned around, and she had her legs spread and was masturbating in a public parking lot. And I had tried to explain to her numerous times before that that's private area. You don't do it in public places. And gone over that with her, and it never seemed to faze her. And
Julie, how often would your daughter masturbate?
Daily. Constantly.
Do you have animals, Beth?
4 of them.
Can you tell me their names?
Clyde, Shuggy, Darcy, and Annie. And Daddy said a day ago that there was a stray cat who did not have a home, so Daddy was taking care of it and took it to the vet when he had his flight to go.
And what do you do to the animals, Beth?
Stick them with pins.
Do you stick them a little bit or a lot?
A lot.
What are you trying to do to the animals, Beth?
Kill them.
What do they do when you stick them with the pins?
Well, Annie cries. She's a dog.
She got baby birds down out of the nest, and we thought maybe she was just curious. So we explained that she could hurt them, put them back, and went through a whole sitting down and talking to her about the problem of it. And the next day we went out to check the baby birds, and they were on the ground dead with their necks broken.
Let's talk about what happened once when you were smaller, when you found some baby birds in a tree. What did you do then?
I took them out.
Mm-hmm. And what did Mom say to you?
That the mother will not come back if somebody touches her baby.
Mm-hmm. Are the baby birds kind of small? Can you describe them for me?
Well, they don't have their eyes open, but they can hear me, and they look up.
Are they kind of helpless? Little baby birds? Can they fly?
No.
Can they run away?
Yes.
They can? Are they easy to catch or hard to catch?
Hard.
Yeah. Well, it's hard to remember. With the baby birds, what did you do?
Took them out of the tree.
And what did you do with them?
Played around too rough with them. Also, when at the end, I picked it up and I thought it was Dad, and I came to say, Mommy, is this bird dead? And she said, she called Daddy and said, Tim, and Daddy came and, I think I remember that they said yes.
Mm-hmm. And so did the little baby birds die?
I don't know.
You don't remember?
I just remember that I remember that Mommy and Daddy saying the last bird we got was dead.
Mm-hmm. Do you know what Mom said to me? She said that all of them were dead. Did you squeeze them? Did Baby Beth squeeze them? You're doing a good job, honey. Go ahead and tell me what happened.
I squeezed them.
And what happened?
They died.
But this kind of aggression at our animals and even at our brother Jonathan was beginning to grow to such an excess that our life was miserable at home. John would cry in the mornings and say his stomach hurt. For the longest time, we thought maybe this child has some problem with his intestinal area, or maybe he has allergies, and so we're trying to get all that checked out. Come to find out, Beth was coming out of her room and hitting him in the stomach. And so, as a last resort, just to protect him, we had to tie our door shut. So I guess for the last 3 or 4 months now, we've had to tie her in at night, sort of barricade her.
The repercussions of Beth's tragic childhood led to uncontrollable rage. Despite the love and nurturing of her adoptive parents, she took this rage out on herself, on her brother, and on them. Her acts of violence became more and more cruel and frightening.
Well, I noticed several, like paring knives in the kitchen, missing. And my first thought was Beth. And I felt a little guilty about it at first. I thought, nah. But I really didn't even mention it to her. They had been gone several weeks. She was sitting at the table drawing and mentioned to me, "What do those knives look like that are gone, Mom?" And I said, "What knives, Beth?" And she said, "Weren't they kind of silver and about this big?" And I knew then, and then this little smile that's not a sweet smile, but a malicious type of smile. And I knew then, I thought, she's got them.
Tell me about the knives. Where did you get them?
From the drawer.
And where else? Do you remember?
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about it.
I got them from the dishwasher.
What kind of knives?
Big sharp ones.
And what do you want to do with those knives?
Kill John and Mommy with them, and Daddy.
And when Mommy asks you about where the knives are, what do you say?
I don't know where they are.
What did you think she might do with the knives?
My first thought was Jonathan.
And the reason we thought that was that by this time, she had tried to kill John on several occasions and openly admitted that.
In the basement, she was hitting his head against a cement floor. I heard his screams and ran down and had to literally pull her hands off, and she looked wild-eyed.
Did you get real mad at him? Did you hit his head real hard? Tell me about it. How many times did you do it? A lot? What was the floor like?
Cement.
And what happened to your brother? Tell me about it.
His head hurt real bad, but his chin, he had to have stitches in it.
Could you stop? Use your words, Beth.
No.
Okay. What was your brother doing when you were doing this?
Playing with the toys.
Okay. Was he asking you to stop when you were doing it? What was he saying?
He said, "Beth, stop."
And what did you do?
I didn't stop. I just kept on hurting him.
What were you thinking when you were doing that?
Thinking of killing him.
How did you stop? What made you stop?
When I heard Peter walking across the kitchen.
Mm-hmm.
It made me stop because I thought Mommy and Daddy would come.
Okay. Did Mommy come? What did she do?
She sent me to my room.
Okay. And what if Mom didn't stop you? What would you have done?
Kept on doing it.
And what about...
After evaluating the extent of Beth's psychological problems, Dr. Magid felt that for the well-being of the family, Beth needed to be temporarily separated from them. In April of 1989, her parents brought her to a special home with an expert at raising children with early attachment disorders, especially children who are dangerous to themselves and others.
I have children that have killed numerous times. Cold-blooded family members, neighbor children killed them. And they can do it. Makes my blood run cold just thinking about 9 years old. People don't think a 9-year-old is capable of cold-blooded murder, but they are. That attachment break does severe damage to the heart, the ability to care and the ability to love. If they don't care and they don't love, they're capable of anything.
We're very strict about everything. Everything is completely monitored. We take complete control because a child who's unattached does not trust. And because they don't trust, they don't allow anybody to be boss of them. So we take complete control. They are not boss of anything. They have to ask to get a drink of water. They have to ask to go to the bathroom. They have to ask to leave our sight. Part of that is because we cannot trust them because of the damage that they've done before.
Beth, would you like to say grace, please?
Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for this good day and everybody doing good. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen. Amen. They believe that they're evil. They believe they're from the devil. They believe that they are not a person of value. And we have to change that, and we have to build that from a child who's nothing, who's a bad kid in their own mind, to a child who's valuable and loving, and they see themselves as that.
You don't have to bite this.
When they do a chore well, we can say, you did a good job, you're a good worker. And then it just builds that self-esteem little by little so that they change the way that they see themselves.
Several months into treatment in this controlled environment, Beth had made progress, and her therapist decided to loosen some of the controls.
Anybody wants some more? I see.
Beth continued to show signs of improvement. She began to develop a sense of right and wrong. She seemed to respond to affection, was more outgoing.
Gosh, you don't have to like.
She went to public school, made friends at the local church, and even sang in the choir.
And you're going to go into Sunday school again this morning?
Yeah.
And get stickers? Maybe you could put one on your nose.
In the years you made it clear that the time of Christ was near. Though the people couldn't see what Messiah ought to be, though your word contained the plan, they just could not understand. That's Elijah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a beard. See his beard. There's his nose, and that's his...
Oh, I see.
Yeah, see his beard is kind of flowing in the wind and everything.
Elijah taken up into heaven, the fiery chariot. Huh? Well, that's Elisha. That's the other prophet that took Elijah's place. And he was left, and there's Elijah,
You know, and he learned about sheep. And the Lord is my shepherd. Mm-hmm. March 3rd, you just got that yesterday, huh?
In the beginning, we couldn't trust her with anything. She was locked up at night. We had alarms on the door at night so she wasn't sneaking around doing things with the other children. We don't worry about that anymore. There's no alarm on her door at night now. She sleeps in the same room with my own daughter, and I trust her that much. She brushes the dogs, and I trust her that much. Because she has earned that trust. She's learned it. She has a heart, and she has a love inside, and she feels bad when she does something now. In the past, because she didn't have a conscience, she didn't feel anything when she did something bad. There was just no feeling there. And now she does feel bad, and it shows in her face. I believe that Beth can make it. She's got a really bright mind. She's got a good heart now, which has done a lot of healing. She's got a really super set of parents. They're powerful, they're knowledgeable, they're motivated. She's done a lot of good work with you in therapy, with Cannell and with myself. She wants to heal, and that's the number one key. And she wants to heal because she has a family that really cares about her, and she wants to be with them.
Do you know where that anger came from?
That's when my birth dad hurt me. I had it all inside, and I remembered it, and I started doing it.
And what did that do when it was inside you?
It made me want to hurt people really bad.
And who did you hurt?
My brother, my mom and dad, and animals.
Who did it hurt the most?
My brother.
Who did it hurt the
Me.
most?
Why don't you tell me that?
It hurt me the most.
How did it hurt you the most?
Because when I hurt other people, I'm burning my get soft.
How you feel right now, Beth?
Bad.
It's kind of tough to talk about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is.
Beth gave her last interview for this film in December of 1989. Although she had made progress, she would still need extensive therapy. Not all abused children are as deeply scarred as Beth, but all abused children suffer a profound hurt for the rest of their lives. The road to recovery is long and hard for the abused child. There are more than 1 million new victims of child abuse in America every year.